Looks like you guys enjoyed the video I put together breaking down the WWF in 1997, so I thought I'd do it again for 1998. There's a lot of fans out there who think 98 was even better than 97, and while I don't think that's the case, who am I to argue with the opinion of others? 1998 was when the Attitude Era got properly ushered in. The main event scene was mostly centered around Steve Austin's feud with The Undertaker, but we also had a lot more going on, such as the rise of Triple H's new DX army, The Rock becoming a main WWF player, and Mick Foley putting everything on the line in order to become a WWF legend. We'll do exactly what we did the last time. I'll do it the right way by breaking everything down month by month instead of doing an overview. So let's revisit the entire year of 1998. The first Raw of the year did a whole lot to set up the 1998 Royal Rumble. Steve Austin got word that the whole locker room was gunning for him at the upcoming Royal Rumble match, so Stone Cold took matters into his own hands and he launched a series of attacks on random superstars. No one was safe from the rattlesnake. Steve Austin was the favourite to win the Rumble match. Remember, he gave up the IC title in December last year so he could go after the WWF title, so fans did expect Austin to win the Rumble 2 years in a row. Also on this episode of Raw, a distraught Paul Bearer announced that Kane had left him, and a bit later on, Kane's brother, The Undertaker, attacked Shawn Michaels after appearing from a casket. The dead man was going to get a title shot against HBK at the Royal Rumble, and it was going to be a casket match. The following week, Shawn Michaels teased that Kane had joined D-Generation X, but instead, the Big Red Machine helped his older brother beat up Shawn and Triple H. So it looked like the Brothers of Destruction were actually united and their rivalry was over. The Royal Rumble pay-per-view takes place on the 18th of January. Steve Austin wins the Rumble match even with the target on his back, and Kane ends up screwing his brother over by helping HBK win the casket match, and that same casket gets set on fire at the end of the show. During this main event, Shawn Michaels hurts his back, and HBK decides to work a limited schedule in the run-up to WrestleMania 14. On the following episode of Raw, Mike Tyson was scheduled to make a huge announcement in regards to WrestleMania, but Steve Austin interrupts the promo. This gets a lot of media attention, and the idea to bring Tyson into the WWF turns out to be a good one. The first Raw of February features DX's famous State of the Union address, one of the most memorable promos of the Attitude Era. Shawn and Hunter want Mike Tyson and Steve Austin to fight each other at Mania. Shawn's trying to worm his way out of a match against Stone Cold, of course, but Austin tells Shawn it doesn't matter when his match against HBK happens, Austin will become the WWF Champion. A bit later on, the New Age Outlaws put Mick Foley and Terry Funk inside a dumpster before throwing them off the Raw stage. It's another memorable moment from 1998 and a moment that the Outlaws initially regretted. However, HBK and Triple H quickly swayed the Outlaws by telling them they only did what they had to do to get over. During a press conference, it gets announced that Mike Tyson's going to be a special guest ring enforcer for the WrestleMania 14 main event, and to ensure he makes it to the main event at WrestleMania, Shawn Michaels pulls out of an 8-man tag team main event match at WWF No Way Out of Texas. Savio Vega replaces Shawn Michaels, which doesn't go down too well with fans in attendance, but the babyface team of Steve Austin, Owen Hart, Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie end up beating Triple H, the New Age Outlaws and Savio. The following night, The Rock annoys Nation leader Farouk when he gives other members of the Nation Rolex watches, while Farouk got a nice portrait of Rocky. And this little promo helps get The Rock over a bit more. He and Ken Shamrock had some good matches in late 97 and early 98, and the WWF were starting to take way more notice of him. WrestleMania 14's happening at the end of the month and Shawn's progressively looking worse as the weeks go on. There's reports about backstage staff worrying if Shawn's actually going to compete at Mania, thinking Shawn's going to pull another move in order to not actually drop the belt to his opponent in the ring. With these worries in mind, the WWF still go ahead and pull a swerve on the 2nd of March episode of Raw when Mike Tyson joins D-Generation X. This means Austin's at a severe disadvantage as we head into WrestleMania. On the same episode of Raw, The Undertaker returns and he finally confirms that he will face his brother Kane at WrestleMania. Taker wanted to avoid fighting his own flesh and blood, but after what happened at the Royal Rumble, the dead man really had no choice. Sable's feud with her husband Marc Mero seriously beginning to heat up, and Sable starts getting better crowd reactions than many of the main eventers on the cards. She's going to get heavily featured on WWF programming moving forward. On the March 17th episode of Raw, Vince McMahon made his heel turn official. He had been teasing the turn for quite some time, but it was on this night when Vince McMahon finally admitted that he didn't want Steve Austin to represent the WWF as company champion. The McMahon-Austin feud officially kicked off on this evening, and it would turn out to be one of the best rivalries in WWF history. At WrestleMania, Steve Austin does indeed win the championship. Mike Tyson double-crosses DX, and while the match was decent, it could have been a lot better. HBK wasn't fully healed up in time for the big main event, and Shawn decided to retire after the bout due to the back injury inflicted at the Royal Rumble a few months earlier. HBK was also dealing with a lot of personal problems. Also at WrestleMania, The Undertaker defeated his younger brother Kane, and Ken Shamrock defeated The Rock for the Intercontinental title, only to have the belt taken off him moments later because he wouldn't let go of the ankle lock. The Raw after WrestleMania 14 felt entirely different to any other Raw show the WWF produced before it. This would be the blueprint moving forward, as the Attitude Era was now 100% ushered in, and Steve Austin would serve as the face of the company during this very lucrative time period. On this show, The Rock kicked Farouk out of the nation and he took over Ron's place as the faction leader. And Triple H announced that he was going to take over as the leader of D-Generation X due to Shawn Michaels dropping the ball. Sean Waltman, who just worked in WCW as Six, made his return on this evening to join Hunter's new DX army. And the show ended with the New Age Outlaws also joining the faction. Waltman's promo is very noteworthy. He took direct shots at WCW's Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff, and he also said the Outsiders would be standing right next to him if they weren't being held hostage in Atlanta. Finally, on this episode of Raw, Vince McMahon presented Austin with a brand new WWF title that fans would name the Big Eagle Belt. Mr. McMahon wanted Steve Austin to be a corporate champion and to do things the right way. Austin tricked Vince into thinking he was actually going to conform by showing up to the April 6th episode of Raw wearing a suit and tie. Austin would take his suit off. He said no one would ever tell him who to be and how to act, and so the McMahon vs Austin feud was now truly underway. We quickly learned that this new D-Generation X are a lot more crude and a lot more juvenile. The group initially act like heels, but their antics begin winning over a lot of fans. Mick Foley, meanwhile, turns heel when he gets upset about fans cheering for DX when the faction beat Terry Funk and himself up inside the steel cage at the end of last month. The April 13th episode of Raw was pretty historic. On this evening, the WWF finally ended WCW's 83-week winning streak in the Monday Night War with a show headlined by Steve Austin vs Vince McMahon. Austin had one arm tied behind his back, and Mick Foley appeared as Dude Love to attack Stone Cold at the opening bell. This attack would lead to Dude Love getting a title shot against Austin at Unforgiven in Your House. The Rock continued to lead his new nation. A new superstar by the name of Val Venus was getting a lot of tape vignettes. Kane and The Undertaker's rivalry would continue on, with Kane challenging his brother to an Inferno match at the next pay-per-view. And Sable continued her feud with Luna Vachon because the WWF seriously lacked capable female wrestlers. At Unforgiven, The Undertaker was able to beat Kane in the first ever WWF Inferno match. I know some people don't think too highly of these match types, but I always enjoyed the spectacle of them. Just the visual of the ring being surrounded in fire is good enough for me. Dude Love was unable to beat Stone Cold in the pay-per-view main event. Mr. McMahon ended up taking a chair shot right to the head, so viewers thought they got their money's worth, though I honestly didn't think too much of this main event. Their rematch next month, in my opinion, was way better. At Unforgiven, the WWF also presented the first ever evening gown match. Sable defeated Luna here, and the match highlights where women's wrestling was in general during this era. The next night on Raw, D-Generation X tried to invade WCW. The boys wanted to drive their Jeep right into Monday Nitro, but they couldn't get access. Seen as one of the most memorable moments of the entire Monday Night War, this was the biggest shot the WWF took at WCW since the Billionaire Ted skits that aired in early 1996. Also on this episode of Raw, Owen Hart joined the Nation of Domination, and a little tidbit that most people forget is the fact that Owen was actually joint leader of the nation alongside The Rock. Mr. McMahon wants Mick Foley to show his gritty and ruthless side in order to get another title shot against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Mick does this by destroying his best friend Terry Funk, and even Steve Austin said this was pretty impressive. Sable gets ready for an upcoming pay-per-view match against Marc Mero. Many folks say that this rivalry killed Mero's career, and Austin admitted that he refused to work with Marc after Sable made him look like a chump. On the May 11th episode of Raw, DX invaded the CNN Center and WCW headquarters as they continued their attempted invasion of World Championship Wrestling. The boys were denied access, but the message was definitely sent. And also, Mick Foley showed up to Raw looking a lot more corporate. The show ended with Mick joining McMahon and the Stooges as they attacked Steve Austin. D-Generation X ran down for the save, and so you can now consider DX fully fledged babyfaces. Dustin Runnels gave up his Goldust character on this episode of Raw, claiming that the character was dead and claiming Vince McMahon was responsible for ruining his life. And this led to Dustin becoming a bit more religious on TV before eventually evolving into the artist formerly known as Goldust. The May 18th episode of Raw saw Paul Bearer announce that he's Kane's biological father. This was a feud that was going to continue on, it seemed. Though at the Over the Edge pay-per-view, Kane actually wrestled Vader, and after Vader took a loss, he called himself a fat piece of shit. It was so out of pocket and out of character that many fans still wonder today why Vader would say such things about himself. The Rock retained his IC title at the pay-per-view after defeating Farouk. Marc Mero defeated Sable, but he had to cheat in order to get the job done. And Steve Austin defeated Dude Love in a really fun Falls Count Anywhere match where Mr. McMahon once again tried to stack the deck against the Rattlesnake. Vince McMahon fires Mick Foley at the very beginning of June. Mick's of no further use to the chairman, for now. The Undertaker, wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants, says he's sick of McMahon using his family tragedy in order to get TV ratings, so the Deadman demands a shot at the WWF title. McMahon books a #1 contender match between The Undertaker and Kane, and the Big Red Machine ends up winning it after Mick Foley interfered. This means Kane's going to face Steve Austin at the King of the Ring, and The Undertaker gets booked in a Hell in a Cell match against Mankind. McMahon decided not to fire Foley after Mick attacked The Undertaker to close out Raw. The following week, Kane appeared from a coffin as he and Mankind attacked Austin, so the commentators wondered how Kane got access to the Druids and how this could all get set up without The Undertaker's involvement. On the 15th of June episode of Raw, Paul Bearer alludes to The Undertaker and Kane actually working together, which catches a lot of fans by surprise. Undertaker denies it, but Austin remains wary of the Deadman. A Hell in a Cell tag team match was booked for Raw, Austin and Undertaker versus Kane and Mankind, and The Undertaker didn't initially show up for the match. This again raised a lot of eyebrows, but in the end Taker appeared from under the ring and he ended up getting locked inside the cell all alone with Paul Bearer. The following week, Kane spoke for the very first time. While using a voice box, Kane announced that if he doesn't win the WWF title at the King of the Ring, he had set himself on fire. This announcement upset Paul Bearer, who was watching Raw from home. Paul was still holding on to the idea that there was some collusion between The Undertaker and Kane. So The Undertaker showed up to Paul's house and Bearer got attacked. In the middle of this, Undertaker injured his ankle, and this is an injury that seriously affected his mobility for the remainder of the year. You could notice it during The Undertaker's entrances, but when it was time to go to work, the Phenom just shook it off. Raw ended with Austin receiving a bloodbath from Kane, and Kane said the blood would be real later in the week at King of the Ring. The pay-per-view arrives, and it's one of the most noteworthy shows of the entire Attitude Era. The Hell in a Cell match featured Mick Foley taking 2 extremely dangerous bumps, with one of these being totally unplanned. First, Mick got thrown off the top of the cell and through a table, and later on, the cell roof gave way when Mick took a chokeslam. This bump knocked Mick out cold, and it was unknown if he was going to be able to finish the match, but the bout continued on with The Undertaker eventually getting the win. It's an incredible match, and it's one of those showdowns you simply have to see if you call yourself a wrestling fan. Ken Shamrock defeated The Rock to become the 1998 King of the Ring, though the big win didn't mean all that much in the long run. Kane faced Steve Austin in a First Blood main event match, and Austin got busted open thanks to The Undertaker. Fans were unsure if The Undertaker intentionally helped his little brother here or if it was accidental, but Austin lost the WWF Championship and everyone was getting prepared for Kane's long and illustrious championship reign. That long and illustrious championship reign ended after just 24 hours though. Steve Austin regained the WWF title on Raw the following night. Earlier in the evening, The Undertaker admitted to helping Kane because he didn't want his younger brother setting himself on fire. And after Austin defeated Kane, The Undertaker made an appearance and he ended up taking a Stone Cold Stunner. Kane and Taker stood in the ring without attacking each other as Raw went off the air, so the WWF were still teasing an Undertaker heel turn at the very end of the month. Also, the final episode of Raw in June saw the beginning of the Brawl for All tournament. You all know what happened here and I don't need to harp on about it. The tournament was put together by Vince Russo because he was sick of Bradshaw bragging to everyone backstage about how tough he was. On the first Raw of July, D-Generation X cut a promo that gets more attention today than what it did back in 1998. The faction dressed up as the Nation, and the WWE tried to make fans forget about this promo by removing it from their streaming services. It was originally uploaded in its entirety, but a revised version of Raw was uploaded in its place. Undertaker, Mankind and Kane were scheduled to face each other in a number 1 contendership match. The Undertaker didn't show up, so Mankind had a one-on-one match against the Big Red Machine and Kane won. Only that's not Kane under the mask, no, it's the Undertaker. How did the Undertaker gain access to Kane's gear, and why did Kane seemingly give up this opportunity to fight Austin for the WWF title? Again, it all pointed to more collusion. The Undertaker was now the number 1 contender. He was going to face Stone Cold at SummerSlam, but Fully Loaded in Your House was coming up before SummerSlam, and at that pay-per-view, Steve Austin was teaming up with The Undertaker to take on Kane and Mankind. Kane and Mankind won the WWF Tag Team titles on the July 13th episode of Raw. This upcoming match would give The Undertaker a chance to prove his innocence, but fans were made aware that something was definitely going on between the brothers during the main event. Triple H complained about the poor officiating during the Outlaws vs Kane and Mankind match, so McMahon booked a main event rematch where Steve Austin and The Undertaker would serve as ring enforcers. McMahon's plan here was to expose The Undertaker once and for all, and indeed, the dead man pulled Austin out of the ring when Stone Cold tried to count an Outlaws pin attempt. Austin returned the favour moments later when Kane covered Road Dogg, and so The Undertaker allowed his little brother to attack Stone Cold while the Phenom went after Mankind. The following week, Undertaker hit his brother with a steel chair, perhaps accidentally, and Austin was now getting fed up of all this, so he took Undertaker out with a chair shot too, meaning no one knew what the hell was going on as we approached Fully Loaded. Also on this episode of Raw, Triple H managed to get a girl in the audience to reveal her Big Mama Jammas, still convinced it was a plant though. And Val Venus saved Mr. Yamaguchi's wife from embarrassment, which would eventually lead Venus into a world of hurt. At the pay-per-view, Owen Hart faced Ken Shamrock in a very unique match taking place inside Stu Hart's dungeon. Owen came out victorious, but the Black Heart would have to step into Ken's world at the next pay-per-view. Dan Severn also served as the referee here, and he'd play a part in the upcoming SummerSlam match too. Rock and Triple H had a fun 2 out of 3 falls match for Rock's IC Championship. The match ended in a draw, but these two had the opportunity to top this match at SummerSlam. Loads of interference in this one here, but still loads of fun. Finally, in our main event, Undertaker surprised everyone by actually helping Steve Austin out and being a good tag team partner. Undertaker tombstoned his younger brother to win the match and the tag team belts, so fans left Fully Loaded thinking there was actually nothing going on with Kane and Undertaker this whole time. The next night on Raw, Austin gave his partner a beer. All seemed well once again, but then Kane attacked Stone Cold before Raw went off the air, and we're back to the guessing game. Also on this episode of Raw, Kantai threatened to choppy Val Venus's PP, it's legendary stuff. And Brawl for All favourite Steve Williams got knocked out by Bart Gunn. Many believe this knockout cost Dr. Death his push in the WWF. On the 3rd of August, WWF fans left Raw thinking Val Venus got his wee Valboski chopped off. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's really what the Attitude Era was all about. More Undertaker and Kane nonsense took place when Kane swung a chair and he hit his own tag team partner, Mankind. Taker took the chair away and he too gave Mick a chair shot. Earlier in the evening, Mr. McMahon tried to press Undertaker on this ongoing saga, and Taker told Austin that McMahon was trying to drive a wedge between the tag team champions, but Austin didn't care. Stone Cold just wanted to get to SummerSlam and finally face The Undertaker one-on-one. The next week, Val Venus explained that he suffered from shrinkage, so Kai and Tai didn't actually choppy his PP, thank God. Road Warrior Hawk's personal issues were being brought to the forefront when he showed up to work drunk and he fell during his entrance, and the tag team champions lost their belts when Kane chokeslammed The Undertaker. Austin was a little surprised the Taker didn't kick out and Undertaker looked guilty as hell. The 17th of August episode of Raw saw the Monday night debut of the Gangrel character, an Attitude Era favourite right here, and the show ended with Kane dressing up like the Undertaker to attack Stone Cold. Austin managed to throw Kane into a hearse parked up at the entranceway, but the Undertaker was behind the wheel and that pretty much confirmed it. The Undertaker was working with Kane all along, and I know people don't agree with me here, but this all went on way too long. This storyline dominated the main event picture for nearly 3 months, and it felt like the WWF were winging it half the time. The following week on Raw, it was confirmed. Undertaker and Kane walked down to the ring together and they stood together. Stone Cold knew that the odds were now really stacked against them heading into SummerSlam. Kane wrestled Mankind inside Hell in a Cell and the Undertaker gave his little brother orders from outside the ring. And the Brawl for All tournament ended with Bart Gunn knocking out Bradshaw. The tournament win should have resulted in a push for the former Smoking Gun, but instead he got punished for it. It's completely backwards, but that's the political world of the WWF for you. SummerSlam arrives, and it's not The Undertaker and Austin who steal the show, rather it's The Rock and Triple H. These two have an incredible ladder match that ends with Triple H becoming the IC champion, though unfortunately he had to forfeit the title due to injury. The match is most definitely worth your time and it comes highly recommended. It's currently uploaded on the WWE Vault. Austin accidentally knocked himself out during the main event match against The Undertaker. The quality of the match suffered because of this, but all things considered, the bout was still decent. It just felt like it should have been way more after the long build-up. Undertaker ensured Kane didn't interfere in the match, Stone Cold got the win, and from here The Undertaker could finally let loose and become the heel he'd been teasing to become for the last few months. For my money, SummerSlam 98 was the best WWF pay-per-view of the year. It really encapsulates the first year of the Attitude Era, and it's a show you should check out when you get the chance. The Brothers of Destruction start wrecking everyone and Mr. McMahon likes what he sees. The chairman can maybe use these two to get the championship away from Austin once and for all. On the September 14th episode of Raw, McMahon announces a Kane vs Undertaker vs Steve Austin triple threat match for Breakdown in Your House. And in this upcoming match, The Undertaker and Kane were prohibited from defeating each other. Bit of an odd booking, seeing as it opened the doors for the brothers to attack each other, but nonetheless, the odds weren't in Austin's favour. Fans were now starting to seriously cheer for The Rock, and so plans were put into place to turn him into a good guy. Mick Foley helped The Rock during his match against Kane, and Rocky repaid the favour when Mankind faced The Undertaker. This all helped fans react even more favourably towards the Great One. Rock goes into Breakdown, and he has the match that I feel solidified him as a true future main eventer. A triple threat cage match against Ken Shamrock and Mankind, which The Rock won. The crowd reaction for Rock here was truly insane, and this one remains one of my favourite matches of the whole year. Austin loses the WWF title, but the double pin at the end means there isn't a clear new WWF champion. McMahon leaves the pay-per-view holding Austin's Smoking Skull belt. In the next night on Raw, McMahon plans on announcing who the new champion is between Kane and Taker, but instead he gets attacked by Stone Cold. Because the brothers failed to protect McMahon, he books Kane and Taker in a match for the vacant title at Judgment Day. And McMahon also announces that Steve Austin's going to be the special referee. This announcement makes Undertaker and Kane attack Vince, and they end up wrecking his leg and knee. On the first Raw of the month, Vince McMahon gets a few visitors at hospital. Mankind, Yerbal the Clown, and Dr. Stone Cold. Top tier entertainment right here, folks. Owen Hart shows remorse after delivering a piledriver to Dan Severn, and it looks like Owen could be done in the WWF. In reality, this would lead to the Blue Blazer returning to the company. The following week, Austin continues torturing Vince by filling his Corvette with cement. The Nation of Domination faction comes to an end when D'Lo and Mark Henry attack The Rock, and the Big Boss Man made his WWF return as Mr. McMahon's own personal security guard. At Judgment Day, the Kane vs Undertaker match ended in a double pinfall, and because Steve Austin didn't crown a new champion, he got fired at the end of the show, so the WWF was still without a champion. The following night on Raw, McMahon announced that the upcoming Survivor Series pay-per-view will feature a one-night tournament to crown a new champion. So maybe the WWF was going to move forward with someone new and they could put the last 2 months or so behind them. The Undertaker then realigned himself with Paul Bearer, which meant Taker's relationship with Kane was damaged once again. Undertaker spoke about some sort of Ministry of Darkness without mentioning that this was an actual faction that was going to debut in the WWF very soon. And this Raw was also very memorable for Stone Cold kidnapping Vince and holding him hostage throughout most of the show. In the end, Austin made McMahon piss himself in the middle of the ring. We learn on the final Raw of the month that Austin's been rehired. Shane McMahon brought Stone Cold back as a way to stick it to his dad, and Stone Cold will take part in the Survivor Series Deadly Game tournament.
Do you smell what The Rock is cooking?
Mr. McMahon began targeting The Rock. If Rock couldn't beat Ken Shamrock for the IC belt on the first Raw of the month, then he'd lose a spot in the Survivor Series tournament. Some shenanigans made sure that Rock didn't get the belt, so for now, one of the big fan favourites was out of the tournament. Vince then began grooming Mankind as his next champion. He even gave him the brand new Hardcore Championship belt. But things went downhill for Vince once again when Rock earned his spot at Survivor Series back by pinning Mark Henry. Shane McMahon helped Rock out a little when he officiated the final moments of the match. This Raw before Survivor Series ended with Rock delivering a rock bottom to Vince McMahon, and Rock was the favourite to win the tournament and become the WWF Champion for the first time ever. This is exactly what happened at Survivor Series, but the WWF pulled off a masterful swerve when Rock joined forces with Mr. McMahon. Vince was able to get Mick Foley in the tournament finals alongside The Rock, and McMahon screwed Mankind the exact same way he screwed Bret Hart a year prior. It was a ballsy move, seeing as The Rock was so popular at the time, but this right here is the beginning of the Corporation faction, and it's the beginning of The Rock serving as the corporate champion. Rock explained the next night that he didn't sell out, he just got ahead. He was proud to be the corporate champ, and the corporation itself ended up expanding later on when Ken Shamrock was also brought into the group. This Raw also featured Road Warrior Hawk climbing up the Titantron and threatening to jump off, one of the more tasteless things WWF did during this year, if not the most tasteless. And in the main event, the Undertaker and Stone Cold rivalry started up once again when Taker attacked Austin with a shovel. Again, I know people won't like me saying this, but I had enough of this rivalry at this point. The 23rd of November episode of Raw saw Shawn Michaels making his WWF return as commissioner. He turned out to be a corporate commissioner when he helped Rock defeat X-Pac in the main event. And this Raw also featured The Undertaker trying to embalm Steve Austin alive, though luckily Stone Cold was saved by Kane, thank God. The month ended with Austin and Kane joining forces to put Paul Bearer down a manhole. So, good times. Rock continued his rivalry with Mankind, while Austin and Undertaker continued their feud. A Buried Alive match was scheduled for Rock Bottom in Your House, and The Undertaker was definitely getting a little darker and a bit more sinister. He ended the December 7th episode of Raw by putting Steve Austin on a giant Undertaker symbol that hung from the arena ceiling. Rock defended his WWF title against Mankind at his very own pay-per-view. The champ passed out when Mick applied the mandible claw, but Mr. McMahon announced that Rock was still champion because he didn't submit during the hold. In response, Foley shoved his smelly sock in McMahon's mouth. The Buried Alive match kinda showed us all that Austin and Undertaker didn't really have much left to give after their long feud during the year. The match was a drawn-out brawl, and it was evident that Undertaker needed time off, and Stone Cold needed to work with a new opponent. In the end, Kane made an appearance and he helped Austin win the match, and the guy driving the digger at the end of the show had some severe technical difficulties when operating the machine. The next night on Raw, Stone Cold learned that he was going to enter the 1999 Royal Rumble at number 1. Vince McMahon announced that he was going to compete in the Rumble too, and he conveniently drew number 30. This Raw ended with The Rock defending his WWF belt against Triple H. Test, who was introduced earlier in the year as the kayfabe bodyguard for the band Motley Crue, attacked Hunter at the end of the bout, and Test would become the latest member of the corporation. On the 21st of December, Steve Blackman took on the Blue Blazer, and everyone was surprised when Owen Hart showed up moments later to jump on commentary. Turns out that this Blue Blazer was none other than Jeff Jarrett. And also on this episode of Raw, Kane joined the corporation. He did this so he wouldn't get sectioned. The final Raw match of the year saw Mankind take on the Road Dogg for the Hardcore title, a match that Foley lost thanks to The Rock. And the year ended with Shawn Michaels superkicking Vince McMahon after McMahon tried to fire him as company commissioner. Shawn would be back of course, but Vince thought it was a mistake bringing him back so soon in a full-time TV role. And that was 1998. Just like the 1997 video, it would have been impossible to include absolutely everything here, but if you want to check out absolutely everything, then check out Reliving the War. It was a year dominated by Steve Austin versus The Undertaker, and, well, the numbers don't lie. The WWF turned the tide in '98 during their war against WCW, and fans really enjoyed all the stuff the company were presenting at the time. WCW wasn't bad in '98 either, by the way, but the cracks had definitely begun to form and the WWF took full advantage. Fans loved seeing Austin, Undertaker, Kane, Mankind, Rock, and everything else that was going on, and what a difference it was in comparison to 1997. I do feel like there were more interesting stories to dig into during 1997, but in 1998 the WWF definitely felt more like a well-oiled machine. They found the winning formula and they were smart to stick with that winning formula. So a good year here for the WWF and one of the best of all time without a doubt. I'll maybe cover a year that wasn't part of the Monday Night War next time, so like the video, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll see what I can do. Thank you for watching everyone, and please take care.